Ireland has become the second European country to need a bailout. And today, German Chancellor Angela Merkel called the situation, quote, exceptionally serious for the euro, the European Union's shared currency. The bailout could be worth as much as $114 billion. Well, joining us right now to talk about all of this and the currency trade, Axel Merk, President and Chief Investment Officer of Merk Investments. He manages more than $550 million in currency-focused assets. Axel, good to be talking with you. Where to start? What about Angela Merkel? What do you make of her comments about the euro? What is she doing here?
Well, she's a straight-talking politician, and she's talking to the home audience that says that Germany is paying for all of this, and we want you guys to make sacrifices in return. But the timing isn't particularly skilled, I would say, and more importantly, because we don't really have a plan on how to achieve it. Right now, she's just putting up demands, and a person in as powerful a position as she is should have a tad more finesse in how she goes about it. But by the way, if you scan the German headlines, that economy is booming. Consumers are excited about the shopping season. There's nothing to be heard about a crisis in Ireland. The Germans are gangbusters because of the weaker euro and because the German economy is doing well otherwise as well.
Well, what about those other economies beyond Germany that aren't doing so well, whether it's Ireland, Italy, Portugal? I mean, how does that factor into things at this point? I mean, will that be enough of a damper on the region and ultimately continue to depress the euro?
Well, exactly. I mean, that's the broader question. In the springtime, we said that the euro being sold as a proxy for all things evil in the eurozone is the wrong approach to it. It should be reflected in the spreads, and we've seen that ever since. Now, again, it goes back to the euro being the proxy. We believe that ultimately the euro can do very well in an environment where you have these fringe countries suffering. The problem you have right now is that you have immense uncertainty. We've argued for a long time that if Ireland wants to have a bailout, they have to talk about it after they pass the budget, because there's no incentive to pass a budget once you have the bailout lined up. And now we see a government that's crumbling. We see nothing in the pipeline of how Ireland is going to get through this. And so that's why we have this market that's extremely defensive. And it's not going to go any better, because obviously Portugal is the next candidate.
Right.
Now, unlike most people, though, we think Spain is not going to be the follow-up. We think actually Spain is in a very strong position. But for the time being, of course, you have a major crisis there.
All right, but if Ireland's not in good state, as we know, if Portugal's not in good state, and there's not any sign of any of this being rectified anytime soon, I mean, Axel, that can't be good in terms of the overall sentiment for the region.
What's good here is that people realize that you can't have it both ways. Real problems exist, and somebody will have to take a hit. And the Irish voters are saying, why us? The Irish banks aren't problems. Well, the creditors of the Irish banks are the German banks, are the French banks, are other banks. Why should they take it? Now, we also know that the central banks are very bad poker players. The European Central Bank will come to the rescue when push comes to shove. At least that's the general understanding. And so ultimately, maybe the European Central Bank will buy those debt, because they don't want to have a collapse of the banking system there. At the same time, because we have a lack of leadership, especially in Ireland right now, it might just come to the point where Irish banks are defaulting, and that's why we see this additional sell-off in the Irish banks. Right. But again, the rest of the banking system in the eurozone can be kept afloat with the European Central Bank. Germany is doing very well. So, well, the dust settles. We believe the euro can strive simply because they're not printing as much money as we do in the U.S.
All right, so two questions. When does the dust settle, though? Do you have any indication? You've got to make investment decisions. So do a lot of folks out there. I mean, when does the dust settle in your view, or is it too early to tell that?
Well, the more hate mail I get about how bad the euro is, the more optimistic I get about the euro, because when everybody hates the euro, there might be blood in the street, there might be a buying opportunity. Politicians do have a way of calling their own dynamics. I would not have expected the Irish to give in to the IMF and the other eurozone leaders so quickly to accept the help, in addition to not even specifying what that help exactly is. And we know that the markets don't like that. And so they don't need the money right now. They could have waited until they have an exact plan in place. We need clarity, as we always need in a crisis, and as long as we don't get that, it's difficult. At the same time, we don't have clarity, and the Irish government is falling apart, so this could linger on for a bit.
All right, what's a bit, though? Again, I'm trying to get an idea of when you think, you've got to make those decisions. When do you think it might settle? Is it before the end of the year, or does this carry out into the new year?
Well, let's put it this way. We have not sold our euro in this current downdraft. Instead, we've been adding to the Swiss franc, which is benefiting, relatively speaking, but is highly correlated. And so there we're diversifying a bit, and we're taking it a step at a time. The real challenge is we have a long weekend coming up in the U.S., and so there's less liquidity in the market, and it seems that European policymakers are not really have their act together right now. But maybe people come to their senses. We really have to wait and see how this plays out. In the meantime, though, we continue to be a buyer on the weakness here in the euro.
All right, so $1.33 is where we've got the euro today versus the U.S. currency. Where do you see it going over the next few months? If you're a buyer of it, where do you see it going?
We believe it will go substantially higher simply because in the Eurozone we can fix many of these issues, and we can patch up the fringe countries. The fringe countries will not derail the major economies. At the same time, in the U.S., we are throwing so much money at a problem that's far more difficult because we are fighting the market forces in the U.S. where consumers like to downsize. And so because of that, we'll be printing and spending more aggressively in the U.S. Ultimately, we'll sprinkle money to fix these problems. And in the U.S., we'll just spend and print money more effectively, or more aggressively, not necessarily more effectively. And as a result, the dollar should weaken over the medium term.
All right. So you said substantially on the euro. How much? Give me some idea.
Well, we were at 143 when we had the recent recovery in the euro. I think that we'll easily reach again, and we'll go far beyond that, simply because the sense of urgency is there in the eurozone. And when you have a sense of urgency, people engage in substantial reform. In the U.S., we've patched up the problem without any real reform, and as a result, all the problems still persist. And the economy is not going anywhere. The central bank, the Federal Reserve, is frustrated, and any money that we spend and print goes everywhere except for where it's needed the most. And so as a result, the dollar will continue to weaken, and it's going to do so until we work with the market forces. At least in the Eurozone, they're doing some of that, even if it is very painful.
Hey, one other thing I want to ask you about, Axel, before you go. We've obviously talked about the euro a lot, understandably so, but what about what's happening in Asia, North Korea, South Korea specifically? How is that impacting potentially your outlook on the currency markets at this point, if at all?
Well, I mean, the good news is in Europe it's only about money. In South Korea, we're talking about real lives that are being affected. On the other side of it, though, North Korea is more predictable than the European policymakers, and so from that point of view, it's more of a known problem. But by all means, it does increase the uncertainty in the region. It is a dampener on confidence. It's a dampener on growth. Again, there we have to take it a step at a time, and then have to think about the likely output, but be prepared for worse outcomes as well.
All right. We'll certainly be on watch. Hey, Axel, thank you so much. Axel Merk joining us, everybody.
My pleasure.
President and Chief Investment Officer of Merk Investments.